The night Serena found out the truth, she was standing in the hallway in her socks, holding a dish towel, listening to her mother-in-law plan how to take everything her father had worked for his entire life. She didn't move. She barely breathed. Through the half-open door of Marcus's home office, she could hear his voice low and careful, the way he got when he was trying to sound reasonable. And then Gloria's voice, his mother, cutting right through it, sharp and sure. "The paperwork needs to be done before Raymond changes his mind," Gloria said. "You know how sick he is. She doesn't need to know the details. Just tell her it's a formality." Serena pressed her back flat against the wall. Raymond was her father. He had been diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer 8 months ago. He'd spent the last 4 of those months trying to get his affairs in order, calling Serena every Sunday to talk about what would happen to her mother, to the house, to the small insurance policy he'd kept up for 30 years. She had cried on the phone with him more times than she could count, and now she was standing in her own hallway, learning that her husband and his mother had already decided what would happen to that money. She met Marcus when she was 26. She'd been working at an accounting firm in Charlotte, and he came in for a consultation about starting his own business. He was charming in a way that didn't feel like a performance, warm, a little funny, and genuinely interested in what she had to say. They dated for 2 years before he proposed. The wedding was small and exactly what she'd wanted. His mother, Gloria, had not been what she'd expected. Gloria was the kind of woman who smiled while she said things that landed like slaps. She told Serena at their first Thanksgiving dinner together that she was lucky Marcus had such a forgiving heart, which Serena didn't understand and didn't ask about. She told Serena her chicken was so much better than last time, referring to a dinner Serena had never cooked for her. She moved through rooms like she was inspecting them, and she commented on everything: the curtains, the grocery brands, the way Serena kept her shoes by the door. Marcus always said his mother meant well. He said she was just from a different generation. He said Serena was too sensitive. Serena had heard those 3 sentences so many times she could have recited them in her sleep. She had quit her job at the firm 2 years into the marriage, partly because Marcus had said it would be easier for her to manage their household finances from home, and partly because she'd believed him when he said it would free her up to eventually start her own practice. She had a CPA license. She knew numbers better than most people. And somehow, over the next 3 years, her plans had gotten quietly smaller and smaller, until she wasn't sure what she'd been planning at all. She and Marcus didn't have children yet. They had talked about it on and off, but something always seemed to get in the way. Money, timing, Gloria suggesting they should wait until they had a bigger place, then suggesting they should move closer to her first. By the time her father got sick, Serena had been a stay-at-home wife for almost 4 years, and her entire financial life ran through a joint account that Marcus managed. She had not thought much about this until the night in the hallway. The conversation behind the door continued. "She'll want to put it in her mother's name," Marcus said. "Then we handle that too," Gloria said. "You're her husband. Legally, you have standing. She's going to find out eventually. Not if you handle it correctly. Raymond trusts you. Get him to sign the beneficiary change before she starts asking questions. She never reads the fine print anyway." Serena's hands had gone very still. She told herself to breathe. She told herself not to open the door. She told herself to keep her face neutral and her body quiet, and she turned around and walked back to the kitchen and stood over the sink and looked out at the dark backyard and thought, they've already been talking about this. This isn't the first conversation. She set the dish towel down on the counter. She did not cry. She was surprised by that. She'd expected to cry, but instead there was something cool moving through her, something clear and quiet, like the moment before a decision gets made. She went to bed before Marcus came out of his office. She said she had a headache. He said okay and didn't check on her. In the morning, she acted normal. This was easier than she expected, and that scared her a little. That she could sit across from Marcus at breakfast and hand him his coffee, and ask if he wanted eggs and feel nothing on the outside while every thought in her head was running calculations. She had spent the night doing 2 things, not sleeping and thinking. She knew what Marcus and Gloria wanted. Her father's life insurance policy was worth $240,000. Raymond had never told Marcus the exact amount, but Gloria had connections at the church her father attended, and Serena suspected she'd gotten the number from somewhere. The plan, as best as Serena could reconstruct it, was to get Raymond to change the beneficiary from her mother, Elaine, to Marcus, framed as an estate planning measure, something that would simplify the process. Raymond was sick and trusting and had spent his whole life believing that family meant something. He would sign if Marcus asked him to. He trusted Marcus. He'd told Serena that more than once. That husband of yours has a good head on his shoulders. She had 2 things working in her favor. First, she was an accountant. She understood exactly how beneficiary designations worked, what could be contested, and what couldn't. Second, Marcus and Gloria did not know she had heard them, and she intended to keep it that way for exactly as long as she needed to. She called her father that Tuesday, which was normal. She called every Tuesday and Sunday. She kept her voice light. She asked about his treatment, about her mother's garden, about whether the neighbor's dog was still getting into their trash. Near the end of the call, she said, almost as an afterthought, "Daddy, has anyone talked to you lately about your paperwork? Your insurance policy?" There was a short pause. Marcus mentioned something, Raymond said there might be a better way to structure things. He's going to come by next week with some forms. Serena kept her voice even. What kind of forms? I don't know exactly. Something about making sure everything goes smoothly. He said you'd been talking about it. Right, she said, of course. Hey, before he comes, can you do me a favor? Don't sign anything until I've had a chance to look it over. You know how I am about paperwork. Her father laughed. You and your fine print. It's kept you out of trouble before. Fair enough, baby girl, fair enough. She hung up and sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up her phone again and called her older sister Priya, who lived in Atlanta and who had never trusted Marcus and had said so, once and never again. I need your help, Serena said. And I need you not to ask me a lot of questions right now. I'll explain everything, but first I need to know, do you still have that attorney friend? The one who does estate work? The next 9 days were the longest of her life. She moved through them like she was playing a role in a movie about her own life. Making dinners, responding to texts, smiling at Gloria when she came over for Sunday lunch, and helped herself to the leftovers in their refrigerator, and rearranged the pantry, just to help. She smiled and said thank you and refilled Gloria's sweet tea. Gloria watched her the whole time, the way she always did, like she was waiting for Serena to make a mistake. Serena gave her nothing. Meanwhile, she was doing other things. She had called Priya's attorney contact, a woman named Beverly who practiced estate and family law in Charlotte, and who agreed to a consultation on short notice. Serena met her at her office on a Wednesday afternoon, telling Marcus she was going to see a friend. She sat across the desk from Beverly and explained the situation in plain, factual terms, the way she would have described a client's finances at her old firm. Beverly listened without interrupting. When Serena finished, Beverly said, "You have more options than you think. Let's start with your father's current policy and work backward." Over the next week, Beverly helped Serena's father confirm his existing beneficiary designations and add a secondary provision that would make any last-minute changes subject to a 60-day review period, a protection Beverly said was standard in contested estate situations. Raymond signed the documents on a Thursday morning with Beverly present, without Marcus knowing the meeting had taken place. Serena's mother, Elaine, cried a little. She said she didn't fully understand everything they'd explained to her, but she trusted Serena, and she was glad Serena had come. Your father always said you were the smart one, Elaine said, squeezing her hand. He says that about both of us, Serena said. He says it about you more. Marcus brought the forms to Raymond's house the following Tuesday the way he'd planned. Serena had not told him she knew. She had not told him about Beverly, or the documents her father had already signed, or the conversation she'd overheard in the hallway. She had simply made sure that by the time Marcus sat down at her parents' kitchen table with his carefully prepared paperwork, there was nothing left for him to take. She didn't know exactly what happened during that visit. Her father called her afterward, and he was quiet in a way that Raymond rarely was. Marcus brought some papers, he said. I know. A pause. He seemed upset when I told him I'd already taken care of things. I imagine he did, Serena. Another pause. Is everything okay with you two? She looked out the window of her car, where she was sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store 2 miles from her house. Not really, Daddy, but I'm handling it. Do you need to come home? She had to press her lips together for a moment. Not yet, she said, but soon. She went home that evening and cooked dinner. Marcus came in while she was at the stove and stood in the doorway for a moment without saying anything. She could feel him watching her, trying to read her face, trying to figure out what she knew and how much. She kept her back to him and stirred the pot. Raymond said you'd already taken care of his paperwork, Marcus said. When did that happen? Last week. She reached for the salt. I mentioned to him that I'd want to look everything over before any changes were made. You know how I am about that stuff. Silence. I was just trying to help, Marcus said. I know. She set the spoon down and turned off the burner. She carried the pot to the counter and spooned and kept her movements slow and normal, the way Beverly had once told her she should act if she ever found herself in a situation where she needed time. Just keep moving. Don't let them see you stop. She set Marcus's bowl on the table. He sat down. He didn't say anything else. She found an apartment 2 weeks later. It was a 1-bedroom in the South End, 2 blocks from a coffee shop she'd always liked, with large windows and a small balcony where she thought she might eventually keep plants. She paid the deposit herself, using money she had quietly shifted from their joint account over the previous 10 days. Not more than her portion, not more than what was fair, just enough to cover first and last month and give herself a starting point. She packed a bag on a Thursday morning while Marcus was at work. She was not dramatic about it. She didn't leave a note full of accusations or speeches she'd been rehearsing. She took her clothes, her documents, her laptop, the photograph from the hallway of her and her father at her college graduation, and the coffee maker that had been a wedding gift from Priya. She locked the door behind her. She sat in her car for a minute in the driveway of the house she had lived in for 5 years, and she waited to see how she felt. She felt okay. That surprised her, the okayness of it. Not happy, not yet, but something stable underneath, like ground she hadn't known, was there until she stood on it. She drove to her new apartment and carried her things up 2 flights of stairs and set them down in the middle of the empty living room. Then she called her mother. "I left," she said. Elaine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Where are you? My new place. Do you need us to come?" "No. I'm okay." She looked around at the empty room, the afternoon light coming through the windows. "Actually, I think I might be more than okay. I just need a minute to figure out what that means." Gloria called 3 times that week. Serena didn't answer. Marcus sent a long text that started with the word Serena and ended with the phrase "we need to talk," and in between contained several sentences about how she was making things harder than they needed to be, how she was overreacting, how her family had always made her too emotional, how she needed to consider what she was throwing away. She read it twice and then set her phone down and made herself a cup of tea. She thought about the hallway, the dish towel in her hand, the sound of Gloria's voice saying she never reads the fine print anyway. She smiled a little, alone in her new kitchen. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the job listings for CPA positions in Charlotte, and she started reading. Her father was still sick. She knew that didn't change, no matter what else changed around it. She drove out to see him that weekend and sat with him in the sunroom while the afternoon got long and golden. And they didn't talk about Marcus or the paperwork or any of it. They talked about the season and the neighbor's dog, and a documentary Raymond had been watching about deep-sea creatures that he said was both fascinating and genuinely upsetting. "You know what I've been thinking about lately," he said at some point. "What?" "That summer you were 12. We drove to the Outer Banks. Your mother got a sunburn so bad she turned purple." He shook his head. "That was a good trip. It was a great trip," Serena said. "We should do something like that again, when you're feeling stronger." He reached over and put his hand over hers, the way he'd done when she was small. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I want you to know that." She didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked at the light on the yard and felt the weight of his hand and let herself sit inside that. "I know, Daddy," she finally said. She got a job offer 6 weeks later, senior accountant at a mid-sized firm in uptown Charlotte, better pay than she'd made before she left the workforce. She accepted on a Tuesday morning, while sitting at the table in her apartment with a second cup of coffee. And afterward she called Priya, and they both said things that didn't entirely make sense and laughed anyway. The divorce was not simple, but Beverly knew what she was doing, and Serena knew numbers, and together they made sure that was Serena's stayed Serena's. She didn't get everything she deserved. That's not how it works. Beverly had told her early on, and Serena had understood. But she got enough. She got a clean start and a clear record, and the knowledge that her father's insurance policy would go to her mother, where it had always belonged. Gloria sent one final message through Marcus's lawyer, suggesting that Serena reconsider and think about what she was doing to this family. Serena's lawyer wrote back. She had been in the new apartment for 4 months when she ran into someone she'd known from her old firm. A man named Adrian, who'd been a junior analyst when she was there and had since moved to a different company. They saw each other at a coffee shop near her office, the kind of run-in that happens in a city that's not quite small but not quite large either. He recognized her first. He said her name. She turned around. They got coffee. They talked for an hour and a half and then looked at the time and both seemed surprised. She didn't know what it would become. She wasn't trying to know yet. She was still learning the sound of her own apartment in the mornings, the way the light moved across the floor, the small quiet routines she was building that belonged only to her. But she laughed easily that afternoon, easier than she had in a long time. And when she walked out of the coffee shop into the bright Charlotte afternoon, she noticed that her shoulders had dropped somewhere along the way. She hadn't even felt it happen. She walked to her car, unlocked it, and sat for a moment with the door open and the spring air coming in. Then she started the engine and drove home.